Hi, this is Joseph Tan here from answersacademy.info. You know, if you flip over the newspaper and most magazines, you will see this term millions of years and millions of years. You know, the age of the earth is millions and billions of years old. You know, dinosaurs lived millions of years ago, millions of years of evolution. So everywhere else we see the message of millions of years. So why shouldn't we as Christians accept millions of years? Now, it is interesting to note that for the first 18 centuries of church history, the almost universal belief is that God created the world in 6 literal days, roughly about 4,000 years before Christ, and that the world was destroyed with a global flood in the time of Noah. Now, this was the belief of early church history for the first 1800 years. It is only during the last 200 years or so that we get new theories of Earth history which proposes that Earth and the universe is millions of years old. So this idea or concept of millions of years is something quite recent, and it is not the traditional view which is held by the early church that the earth is created 4,000 years before Christ, which makes it about roughly 6,000 years old today. So, are both of these reconcilable? Now, many Christians say that the age of the earth has really no important bearings on the gospel, that this is an unimportant and side issues which potentially divides the church rather than bring us together. So instead of quarreling about the age of the earth, whether if it is millions of years old or thousands of years old, it really doesn't matter as long as the good news is proclaimed and people come to faith. Is this really so? Now let's take a look at how the word day, which in Hebrew is yom, used in Genesis chapter 1. You see, in Genesis chapter 1, yom is used with evening and morning. And everywhere these two words are used in the Old Testament, either together or separately, always means a literal evening or morning and a literal day. So it's not just yom alone, but yom with evening and morning. Also, the word yom is modified with a number. 1 day, second day, third day, and so on, which everywhere else in the Old Testament indicate literal days. Also, when a statistical analysis of the genre of Genesis chapter 1 to 2 was done, it has been shown at a 99.5% confidence level that the text in Genesis chapter 1 to 2, and for that matter, the whole book of Genesis, it is a historical narrative from the language that is used. It is not poetic, as some would like to conveniently surmise. Statistically, it is 99.5% confidence level narrative. So Genesis chapter 1 verse 2 is a narrative of what actually happened. Also, the genealogies of Genesis chapter 5 and 11 make it clear that creation days happen only about 6,000 years ago, because the birth and death of the early of our early fathers were documented in detail in Genesis chapter 5 to 11, and if you add it all up, it can only account up to about 6,000 years of earth history. So what's the biblical worldview of the age of the earth? Well, from Adam to Abraham is about 2,000 years, and Abraham till today is another 4,000 years. So all in all, the age of the earth from a biblical perspective is estimated to be about 6,000 years. Now in Mark chapter 10 verse 6, Jesus said very clearly that it is from the beginning, that God created them male and female, referring to Adam and Eve. So Adam and Eve, they were created from the beginning. Now follow along with me. If Adam and Eve, they were created from the beginning, and from the estimates of the biblical genealogical records, that the history of the earth is only about 6,000 plus years old, and yet the concept of millions of years tells us that millions of years ago, if you take a look at the fossils, they all contain death, suffering, cancer, tumor, and so on. So according to the millions of years thinking, the fossil record which exists millions of years ago show evidence of death and suffering. And this is not compatible with the biblical understanding of sin and death. Let me explain. Now, if Adam and Eve were created at this point in time, God said that everything that he has made at the end of the sixth day was very good. Now, when God said that his creation was very good, he actually meant very good, because that's what a perfect God says. And something which is very good means there is no death, there is no suffering, there's no cancer, and so on. Because basically, Adam and Eve, they have not sinned yet, because the fall of man happened around here. So when did sin and death enter into Earth's history? It is from this point onwards. But if the fossil record is true, what this says is that there are piles and piles of fossils with evidences of death piled up beneath the Garden of Eden when God proclaimed that everything was very good upon creation. So how could there be piles and piles of fossils and dead bones, and evidences of death beneath the Garden of Eden when God said everything was very good? This is not compatible with the biblical understanding of sin and when the fall happens. So the millions of years philosophy does not jive with our understanding of death, sin, and suffering. Just as sin and death entered into the world's history through the act of the first Adam, the act and sacrifice of the last Adam, Jesus Christ, upon the cross, brought us life and victory. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 45, we see that Adam is called the first Adam, and Jesus Christ is called the last Adam. The history of the earth is not a side issue because it connects the entrance of sin into the world and the salvation that is available for us in Jesus Christ. Now, if the biblical record of the history of the world is in doubt and the concepts of millions of years start to creep into our Christian worldview, then this linkage of history is compromised. And when the historical accuracy of the connection between the sin and the Savior, between the bad news and the good news, then this is hardly a side issue. In fact, the right understanding of the earth's history is fundamental to our understanding of the gospel, because the gospel is needed because our history states that sin came into the picture through a historical Adam and Eve, and the record for us in the first book of the Bible is true historically and literally. Think about it. This is Joseph Tan here from AnswersAcademy.info. Thanks for watching.